Oh. So, how many times have you heard this? Or said it to your teams? Or when you've been briefing your agency? And we've already heard today, authenticity, it's a bullshit term. But in defense of cliches are cliches for a reason. And I don't think it speaks to a lack of critical thought. We work with a lot of intelligent people and who do a lot of smart work. I think it speaks more to a kind of a need for vocabulary in this space. So I think when people talk about authenticity, what they're actually asking you to do, executionally speaking, is make your work funny, make it friendly. Can we get this to lean more into trend? Can we make it feel more sincere, more imperfect? You know, to make it feel rough around the edges so that it feels real in the hand, it feels real when you hear it. Make it more relatable, empathetic, and warm. But if you group all of these things together, what we're actually saying is, can you make it feel more human? So, and this is sort of, over the last sort of 12, 18 months, we've been asked by a lot of clients to kind of almost humanize the way that their brands speak, the way that they talk. And sort of to try and code that into the verbal systems that underpin their brands and their brand storytelling. And so, for example, for global payments, we've now got In Touch and Out Front, and it's kind of like the bigger they get, the more they want to feel like that their customers are in touch with them and that they've got this closeness and this connection with the people that they work with. SiriusXM, who we worked with the verbal project with Uncommon on, it's about being alive, obsessive, close, really intangible human terms. And you know, for the Andrex project, like we were using terms like trying to find ways to use language to kind of emotionally disarm people, to elicit this emotional response. And I got to thinking, why is this happening? Why is this happening more and more in the projects that we're getting and the work that we're having to do? And why is it happening now? And I think there's two particular reasons behind this. And I think, obviously, I'm Gen X, so I've had the last quarter of a century to sort of witness this change happening. But we've gone from this kind of historic broadcast model of, you know, going out into the world, onto television, onto your billboards in this advertising space and going, this is our thing, it's awesome, you're gonna love it. And so, but what we've got now, what started as a broadcast, is now a conversation. So as the second something goes out into the world, your audiences feel almost, they feel compelled to comment, to engage, to evaluate, to have an opinion on it, and they feel entitled to it, and they want to be heard. They want to feel like there's a reaction. And there's a conversation going on between brands in some cases, and this was Dunkin' and Walgreens last week being weird on the internet, which, if that's your thing. But all that to say that brands are now in a space where they need to exist authentically in a number of different ways at the same time. So whether or not you're pulling together a prospectus for your private equity investor, or whether or not you need to reach out and connect with your fans on TikTok, you need to be your authentic self. But also, and again, we've already touched on this, and I'm pretty sure that every single talk you're going to hear today is going to touch on AI, but since I'm in the presence of some of the leading branding minds in New York, I'm going to pull a quote from a British broadcaster and writer, Richard Osman, who I don't know whether or not this audience necessarily knows him, but he was part of the creative team that brought Big Brother and Deal or No Deal to the UK, and you know, turned Endemol into a $3 billion company. But so all that to say, he's made a lot of money out of giving people exactly what they want. And he said this on his podcast fairly recently, and it really stuck with me, which is, people are obsessed with authenticity. As the market becomes saturated with slop, the desire to find some truth and human connection will become more and more powerful. And we're already seeing it. Duolingo, who we used to use it a lot in our presentations, is a great example, great brand voice, great engagement. There's really good sort of character to it. They made this decision to replace their contractors with AI, and the response was swift and unambiguous. It was not popular. And we're seeing it, you know, time and again in New York. And yeah, this currently the most sort of expensive public are happening, going on with people sort of attacking the friend branding, and the Stop Hiring Humans billboard, which caused all kinds of outrage on LinkedIn. So to sort of put some numbers to it, 92% of Gen Z respondents believe that being authentic and true to oneself is extremely or very important, so there's no ambiguity about that, however you interpret the word authentic, whatever value you put on it. 47% think that cause marketing is just a ploy if it's not related to the brand, and I think that speaks to sincerity and that sort of like key tenet of the authentic brand relationship. And then 64% of consumers globally would prefer to buy from a responsive company over one that appears perfect. And that one really stuck out to me. They'd rather you engaged with them, reacted to them, and interacted with them than did everything right. And I think that's really sort of an interesting tell. Because people want to feel engaged and heard. They crave connection and interaction that makes them feel part of the world. Also, to put it another way, human is the new premium. I don't think it's a new sort of observation to make that basically it's cheaper to get a machine to do something than to get a human to do it. But I think now when we're in the creative space, in the branding space, we've got to a point where if something feels like it's been thought of or said by or crafted by human hands, it automatically feels of higher value, that it is more premium. So you're wondering, what's this got to do with verbal identity? And I suppose my answer to that is pretty much everything, because language is the most human thing that we have. It's the source code for all of our ideas, it's our starting point, it's how we connect, it's how we interact, it's how we build communities. And from a business point of view, it's flexible and it's scalable. So if you want to do humanity at scale, like your voice can be a really great kind of asset, a really powerful and kind of versatile asset for doing that. So, without further ado, I'm just going to get into some kind of some hacks that we use when we're kind of codifying humanity into brand voice. So, let's get hacking. Number one, less archetype, more character. So, I like archetypes. We use archetypes. Our clients use archetypes. There's nothing wrong with them. But what happens when you actually come to have a kind of a three-dimensional conversation with your consumers and with your audiences, it starts to feel kind of like wanting in terms of, for example, how is this person going to respond to a certain set of situations? So this is something that I sort of say to my writers when we're briefing verbal identity jobs, is just imagine that the market, the category, or the commercial landscape is a scene in a play. Who just stepped out onto the stage? What do they have to say, and how does it change the dynamic in the scene? And it forces them to think sort of slightly more emotionally about how these kind of these propositions are going to interact in the world within the sort of the category that they exist in. And so when you've got something like an archetype, like the hero, just doesn't give you enough information on that. You have to go a little bit deeper. Hack number 2, and for fans of ASL, cut the bullshit. So the audiences that we're dealing with are digitally native, they're chronically online, and they've been spied on, lied to, ripped off, and let down by every corporation and government their entire lives, and they know it. So they can smell bullshit coming a mile away. And so common sense stuff, just whenever you're committing words to paper or you're deciding which stories that you want to tell in which places in the market, just make sure that you're always just being specific, transparent, committed, and consistent. And just to give you a couple of examples of what I mean by that. Specific is it's as simple as just using concrete nouns and real-world benefits. We've already seen Apple, but their current vision statement is to make the best products on earth. And I'm sort of setting that aside, a brand with a very kind of almost a parallel origin story in terms of time frame and kind of location. And their current vision statement is to help people and businesses around the world to achieve their full potential. By doing what? Like, in what way? Are you going to give me an 8th day so I can finish my novel? You know what I mean? It's just like, in what way are you going to help me fulfill my potential? And one of those is currently sort of enjoying launching the iPhone 17, and another one is giving millennials PTSD with the Teams call sound. Second one, transparency. Avoid lies of omission. And this is, it's not, obviously, avoid outright lying, that goes without saying. But there's a certain sort of lie of omission that you will get found out, and you will get found out quickly. And I'm just giving you an example of from TurboTax from a couple of years ago, where they had this line, free for free, 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 free. If you'll probably remember the adverts, and it's the kind of the most sort of asinine sort of copy line since Liberty, Liberty, Liberty. But the point was, it wasn't free unless you fell into a very, very specific, very, very narrow piece. And they got found out, and they got absolutely slapped for it. So yeah, avoid lies of omission, and even better, don't lie. 3, committed. Avoid hedging language and stay clear of subjunctive. Now, this is something that, in fairness, we don't get asked to do this very often. It happens less and less these days, but here are 2 corporate CSR statements from 2 very large companies. One of them says, delivering more sustainable products and solutions. Just by putting that more in that statement, they are committing to absolutely nothing. You're more sustainable than what? Exxon? What are we talking about here? And then you've got, we want to create a cocoa sector where human rights are respected. That is a pretty low bar. They want to, they might not. We'll see how it goes. And also, human rights are respected. Can we at least try with enforced? Go on. Have fun, go mad. If it's not a principle if it doesn't cost you anything. And then consistent. And this one's like a little bit lighter. Just to sort of, if you're going to stand for something, if you're going to have a point of view, make sure that it appears consistently wherever it is. And it doesn't have to be, there's a key difference between monotony and consistency. It's just you don't have to use the same words, you don't have to have the exact same message, but as long as the spirit and the essence of what you're trying to say, what you stand for, how you want to appear in the world is consistent, have at it. So, number 3, read the room. So when it comes to flexing brand voice, and this is particularly where humor and wordplay comes in, and I touched on this, and I'll touch on it again with the Zipcar examples, but you have to pick your moments. You have to understand the stakes, you have to understand the context, and you have to understand the moment. And so it's understanding what mental state, whereabouts are people going to be experiencing this brand? Where are they going to be seeing this? Where are they going to be interacting with it? And what's going on in the world? So understand the moment. So, don't put women belong in the kitchen on Twitter on International Women's Day, Burger King. So just to example how we sort of set up systems for that and the kind of guidance that we build around these things is, for example, for Zipcar, if we're selling a good time, we can have a bit more fun with it. We can be a bit more kind of free with the sort of way that we sort of structure language and how we put a headline together. So, from late night snack to a never late for class, your car when you need it. Again, this one's very much specifically for students. But if you're owning mistake, they've gone there, they need the car, they've booked the car, they get to the parking spot and there's nothing there, late car, call Zipcar and our app and we'll get you on your way. So cutting straight to the point, no bullshit, no mess, not trying to be clever or entertaining, you're just delivering. This is an example from a recent trip to a hotel in London. And it's what are you trying to tell me? Just keep the writing out of the way of the message. If you're saying, put the towel on the rail if you want it, if you want to keep it, drop it on the floor if you want it washed, that's the story, that's the message. But it's a happy towel is a happy planet, and then they, please decide for yourself. It's just kind of weird, and it's overwritten, overthought, it's a bit of a mess. And this one particularly was, this was at South by Southwest in London. And it's pathway to possibilities and registration. If you're putting the important information in parenthesis at the end because you don't think your copy's clear enough, your copy isn't clear enough. So, and don't do whatever the hell this is. I think, and if anybody loves a good bit of LinkedIn tea, this is great. But there's a serious point to be made is that I think because social media sort of platforms, it's sort of immediate, it's ephemeral, it's just kind of, it's there and it's gone. And all there's a sort of a tendency to think that it isn't a sort of a super, super important and consistent part of your brand voice. And it is, so don't be us when we're drunk, It's kind of It's not a great start. So finally, the final hack is sound like you, not them. So more cliche feedback, make it sound more Gen Z. And yep, I've been guilty of saying it, and I've heard it, and we've been in meetings where it's been discussed. How do we do it? How do we do it? How do we do it? You don't. This is my advice to you. You don't. Because it's cringe. Because it is. And they're not laughing with you, they're laughing at you. And just to say this, that culture moves faster than brand approval processes, unless you have a brand that is specifically tooled up to do this. This is all you're about, and this is what you invest all of your energy in. Just getting a marketing agency to make it sound Gen Z isn't going to work. By the time you sign it off, the language will be out of date. We're talking 8-month processes to get a pack out onto a shelf, 18-month processes to get a CPG pack out into the market. It's going to be stale as hell by then. So bringing back to the sound like you, not them idea, I want to share with you an example of a project that's actually, it's up for an award this evening, so we're kind of keeping our fingers crossed for that. But it's a story that starts in Scotland. And when I say Scotland, you will have ideas popping into your head, mental images. Anything from, groundskeeper Willie to terrible sort of Canadian comedians doing bad Scottish accents to aspirational wildlife. But the client that we were working with was Enduro, which is a Scottish cycling brand, and it was actually founded by actual Scots, so Jim McFarlane and Pamela Barclay. And we were brought on board because they were like, okay, right, we want Enduro to feel like an authentic Scottish brand. We were brought on board because they wanted an authentic Scottish brand. And when they said Scottish, they didn't want it to feel like it was artifice, it was stereotype, it was kind of layered on. And so what we started with was, we gave them the voice of a joyrider. We started with the energy and the attitude and who they were when they were out on their bikes, enjoying the Scottish kind of countryside and all of the wonderful cycling that's out there. It's the voice of a joyrider. It's not the voice of a Scottish joyrider or the Flying Piper or anything like that. And so the voice that we created was fueled by off-kilter euphoria, and it's cycling's a release. We live for it. We're serious about making solid kit that gets more people out there more often. We're unserious about ourselves and pretty much everything else. Our writing keeps that balance with zero effort. It captures the moment your feet hit the pedals and you become 10 again. And it's got that kind of, I don't know, there's a sort of a really kind of almost childlike enthusiasm and energy to it. It was when we start getting down into the layers of how you execute and how you write for that brand, we can bring in the tactics like this, where we can draw hard lines through the stuff that will pull this off track and drag it into inauthentic artifice really, really quickly. So it's the attitude, not the stuff. So it's not haggis, neeps, and tatties. It's not tartans and Nessie and other trite tourist crap, which, as I'm sure Paul will attest, is exactly how a Scottish person would say other trite tourist crap. But what we did was, we were like, okay, right, so how do we enable writers to be able to apply this stuff, to use it, even if they're not from the area or if they're not Scottish writers? And we were like, it's all about kind of context. If you've ever had a conversation with a proper Scottish person, they don't stop to explain what they mean. They just talk how they talk, and it feels natural, and they'll use words that you absolutely don't recognize. For example, here is like Drake. And so we put in the system, just make sure that the context is absolutely telegraphic. So time to get soaked, it's a real Drake day out. So you still don't know 100% what it means. It could mean wet, it could mean dreary, it just means that you need a good jacket, and I think the context is strong enough that that's kind of implicit. So don't do this, it's a very Drake day out there. That's how Scottish people say dreary. So don't do that. And obviously don't do, okay, it's a broad day for a ride, always a good Craig. Getting classy. I was going to do that with a Scottish accent until I saw Paul and I thought, no, that just feels rude. Anyway, and this is how that's sort of coming to life out in the press. There's nothing overtly kind of stylized towards the Scottish market in that sense. It's all attitudinal, it's all aesthetic, it's sod it. It's that attitude of, yeah, it rains all the time here. If we cared about that, we wouldn't go cycling. So, yeah. And yeah, so this is the work, and it's feeling pretty good, and it's going down well. So, yeah, just to kind of summarize that, number one, build three-dimensional characters. Just imagine, just anthropomorphize the brand you're writing for and how they're going to act in certain circumstances beyond the archetypes and beyond those sort of brand strategy pieces. Just cut the bullshit, because you will get caught out, because you will, and you'll get absolutely slammed for it. Read the room, make sure that you're aware of context, make sure you just pay attention to what's going on in the world, like beyond yours, and into the greater sort of arena of human existence. And finally, sound like you, not them. For God's sake, don't try to sound like Gen Z. No cap. Right? Thank you very much.
Obviously, there are certain sectors where there is a lot of regulation and a lot of in the B2B space, where you're needing to talk to regulators, where you're needing to say things in certain ways, where you can't say it in the other way. Does that make that, if you are having to speak both to customers and other stakeholders in one way and also having to conform to regulations there, does that make that ability to be authentic harder?
No, I mean, it's just a sort of a different mindset. I mean, it's... Again, when we're talking about brand flex, one of the things that we often say is, whether you're in the pub or you're at work, you're still yourself. It's that Beatles slide again. But if we're talking about creating authenticity for B2B, it's just organizations are still people. And the authenticity comes from speaking to the reality of the world, not using really horrible kind of corporate speak, all of that kind of... Some of it sounds really obvious, but there's a certain gravity towards it, and I think especially in the way that, people are educated and the systems that they come up through into those businesses, when you end up kind of building a brand, it's just like, oh, this is how people talk, and it's just like, no, it's not. And it's just getting them to step away from that. I think regulation comes into everything. Even with the CPG stuff, everything has to go very, very legal. All the consumer brands, we have to be very careful about what we say and how we say it, but that doesn't mean to say that you can't feel like a human experience.